This morning, there is some relief for customers after the historic collapse of Silicon Valley Bank.
Yeah, after shutting down one of the tech industry's top banks on Friday, federal authorities say they will fully protect money deposited at SVB, and customers will have access to all their money beginning today. But yesterday on CBS's Face the Nation, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen made it very clear the federal government is solely focused on helping depositors get their money, and she said the government will not bail out SVB.
During the financial crisis, there were investors and owners of systemic large banks that were bailed out, and we're certainly not looking, and the reforms that have been put in place means that we're not going to do that again.
Many tech companies abroad are also breathing a sigh of relief. This after the largest bank in Europe, HSBC, announced it is rescuing the UK subsidiary of Silicon Valley Bank after all-night talks. For more on all this, we are joined by NBC News senior congressional reporter Scott Wong and Investopedia editor-in-chief Caleb Silver to help us break it all down. Thank you both. Scott, let's start with you. In a tweet last night, President Biden said he was firmly committed to holding those responsible for this mess fully accountable. We know senators received a briefing from the Biden administration on SVB last night. What can you tell us about all this?
Well, obviously, this has been a big topic all week, and it's going to be a big topic on Capitol Hill all week. We will hear directly from the president later this morning, who will address the issue and the actions that his administration is taking to try to stem some of the concern about the markets and in the banking system in general. What we know is that last night, Treasury and Federal Reserve officials from the administration briefed all House and Senate lawmakers. There were some that were left off the call due to the hastily arranged phone call. But we also heard those officials brief reporters as well. And what we heard is pretty much what you laid out and what the Treasury Secretary laid out, that folks who put their money in these banks, both Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank of New York, will be made whole. They will be able to access all of the funds, even beyond the $250,000 federally insured limit, as soon as today. The Treasury officials also really emphasized that taxpayers will not be on the hook. This money is coming from an insurance pool that banks pay into periodically. And so this money is not coming from out of taxpayers' pockets. And that is something that this administration really will be emphasizing throughout this week as Republicans attack this plan of action as a bailout. It is, in fact, not a bailout as we have seen in past economic crises. So that is certainly very important. We'll hear from the president later this morning.
And Caleb, let's talk about the what and how. SVB is not a small bank, right? It's the 16th largest bank in the United States. How did it fail, and what does it mean, big picture, for the rest of the economy?
Well, big picture for the economy, I wouldn't worry too much unless we have several more of these failures, so to speak. But why did it happen? A lot of these banks, what do they have to do with the money they're holding, the deposits? In the case of SVB, that was $172 billion. They have to invest in it, and they were invested in government securities. But you guys know the impact of rising interest rates is not just something we feel through inflation. You feel it if you're holding those assets as a bank. So the value of the assets they were holding were dropping in value because of what happened last year. So rising interest rates have this big impact, and it hurt the balance sheet of this bank. When depositors came for their money, they just didn't have it, and that's how this happened. We have to see what other banks are holding, but you can't ignore the fact that rising rates have had a big impact here.
So this is the second biggest bank failure in U.S. history. It's the biggest we've seen since the financial crisis back in 2008, and people are watching this and saying, okay, is this going to be a similar scenario? Are we going to see this spread? Is this different? And if so, how?
Yeah, it's different because back in 2007, 2008, banks were holding on to mortgages that were undervalued as well. There was systemic risk across the banking industry, not just here in the U.S., but across the world. Right now, we're talking about some big banks, but not as big as the biggest banks in the world that hold trillions of dollars in assets. The economy is going to be okay. The banking system is going to be okay. But you have to listen closely when you hear Treasury Secretary saying things like systemic risk, and we're trying to prevent a bank failure here. That's important to listen to. We got to watch what happens next.
We'll be keeping an eye on it. We know you will, too. Thank you so much, Caleb Silver and Scott Wong. We appreciate your time. Now to weather and serious conditions to talk about all across the country, really.
This morning, millions in the Northeast are under winter alerts. A major nor'easter is expected to bring snow, rain, gusty winds to part of this region where we are through Wednesday. In the upper Midwest, heavy snow and blizzard conditions swept across parts of the region yesterday, bringing more than half a foot of snow to some areas. But the big story this morning is out in California, where they're dealing with serious flooding, overflowing rivers, and in one case, a levee breach. All of this as the state is getting hit with more heavy rains and snow.
Yeah, we have full coverage this morning. NBC News meteorologist Michelle Grossman is standing by with the forecast. But first, let's go to NBC News correspondent Niala Charles, live in Pajaro, California. Morning to you there. Tell us what is happening. What are you seeing where you are? This is the scene of a massive flooding this morning after a levee broke. How bad is it?
Ellison, the entire town of 1,700 people here in Pajaro have been evacuated under evacuated orders, with the last people being rescued and evacuated last night. The people who live here received that evacuation order Friday around midnight as the atmospheric river passed through and the levee broke. Since then, in the last couple of days, the water has been rising. It's up to 3 feet of standing water in places. That means people had to leave their homes and lives behind quickly, and it could take months for the homes to be repaired in this migrant community. Ellison?
So, Niala, this is a community that's under mandatory evacuation orders. What else can you tell us about that and how the community is preparing for potentially another round of storms in this area on Tuesday?
The people who live here have been evacuated to evacuation centers across the county. All they can do at this point is hope and wait for the best as officials try to repair that dam, as another atmospheric river is expected to pass through this evening. And if with that comes several inches of rain, that could be detrimental given the existing damage. Ellison?
What sort of resources are available for people who are having to flee or who just need some sort of time to get back on their feet?
There's things like mental health support. As you can imagine, this is a very difficult time for families. Their situation changed very quickly, and they've already had been recovering from a last wave of atmospheric rivers just months ago. Ellison?
All right, Niala Charles, thank you so much for that.
All right, Michelle Grossman is here now with more on the situation in California and the forecast for the rest of the country.
Yeah, good morning, Michelle.
Good morning to you both. And unfortunately, we're watching another atmospheric river event setting up really tomorrow. So starting later today into tomorrow. Then on the East Coast, we're watching that developing nor'easter. Same story. It's sort of the calm before the storm this morning. And then we'll see it develop later on tonight and tomorrow. We're going to see really strong winds, some snow, and also some rain. So this morning, 25 million Americans under winter alerts. You can see them stretching throughout the West into the upper Midwest, the Great Lakes, into portions of the Northeast as well. We have look outside because it's a gloomy start to the day. This is what we're looking at right now. Wait till tomorrow morning. We could see some snow at this hour tomorrow, but it's foggy. We have low clouds. We have drizzle. This is the calm before the storm, but not a great morning commute either in New York City. Not a great commute tonight, and then especially not tomorrow morning. So there are 25 million Americans under winter alerts, where you see the alerts in pink. That's your winter storm warning. Winter storm watch is in blue, and a winter storm advisory is in white. So certainly plenty of weather to start out this work week, and this is going to be going until Wednesday, both these storms. Let's start with the nor'easter because we're looking at heavy rain, some snow spreading across the Northeast, a cold rain throughout the day for the I-95 corridor. We could see that already starting at this hour. Where you see those brighter colors, that's where we're expecting the heaviest rain. So this area of low pressure is going to develop off the coast. Then by tomorrow, we're looking at really heavy snow bands. We could see 1, 2, 3 inches per hour developing over portions of the Northeast. That would be interior parts of the Northeast. And then the winds are going to be howling as well. Strong winds gusting up to 40 to 60 miles per hour along the coast. That's going to cause some power outages. It's going to be cold with temperatures at or below freezing in many spots. So certainly power outages could cause some problems. Then by Wednesday, We just see it sitting and spinning along the coast there. It's not going very far, so we're looking at still that system stalling off the New England coast. We're going to see snow, some strong winds lingering across New England. That could lead to more potential power outages. So this is a 3-day event, really ramping up tonight into tomorrow. So in terms of your impacts, we're looking at snow, we're looking at rain, and we're also looking at some really gusty winds. Localized amounts up to 2 feet of snow through Wednesday. Again, seeing snowfall rates 1, 2, 3 inches per hour. This is going to make travel very difficult, if not impossible, in some spots. Where you see those brighter colors, the pinks and purples, that's where we're expecting the highest amounts of snow. We'll go over those amounts in just a bit. Damaging winds, too, especially along the coast, with winds gusting up to 60 miles per hour. Strongest during the day on Tuesday, but still whipping on Wednesday throughout parts of New England. Snowfall totals, it's March 13th. Doesn't this really just make sense, right, for this winter because it's been so strange? Of course, we're talking about a nor'easter on March 13th. So we're looking at, did I say March 1st, March 13th? Not to confuse people. Augusta, Maine, we're looking at 8 to 12 inches. Boston, you could see 4 to 8 inches. 1 to 3 in New York. That's going to be a slushy snow. The other snow is going to be that heavy, wet snow, so really difficult to shovel, and that creates some health problems, so be careful as you're shoveling tomorrow. Albany, 2 feet of snow in some spots. Syracuse, 12 to 18 inches. Scranton, you're looking a lot too. A half a foot of snow, even up to 8 inches in some spots. Also looking at a lot of rain because we have a lot of moisture with this system. We have a lot of cold air in place, too, in many spots. So 1 to 3 inches of rain may cause some flooding. Where you see those brighter colors, the oranges, the yellows, that's where we're expecting the highest amounts of rain along the coast, especially with those winds too. Let's talk about the West because we're looking at many flood alerts, 17 million people impacted throughout Oregon, the Pacific Northwest, into California. That includes Eureka, into Lake Tahoe, Fresno, also Bakersfield. And we certainly could see some flooding once again, even some flash flooding. This is the risk for today, where you see the pink, that's your moderate risk. That's going to be the highest threat. And then a slight risk is in the blue, and that includes most of California, at least the northern parts. And we're going to extend that into Southern California tomorrow. So again, where you see that reddish blue, reddish pink color, we're looking at moderate risk through Yosemite into portions of Southern California, just north of Los Angeles. Once again, we don't need the rain here. We don't need the snow, but we're going to be measuring the snow in feet once again, and many inches of rain. Some spots could see 7 inches of rain. This is what it looks like for the West, a deluge of moisture. The atmospheric river setting up later on today. Heavy rain, strong winds increase tonight, especially into Tuesday. Again, Northern California, that's where we're seeing the highest amounts of rain today. And then it expands into Southern California tomorrow. Winds gusting up to 55 miles per hour. Could see some power outages there as well. Plenty of brighter colors, so oranges and reds and yellows in the state of California tomorrow. That means we're going to see a lot of rain, and that's why we have the potential for some flooding and some flash flooding. And Wednesday, we'll see it move off to the east as we clear through the Rockies, and we'll see the rain and snow showers slowly coming to an end. So, guys, lots going on. We'll talk more about it in the next hour, but we're looking at 2 storm systems on either coast.
Wow, yeah, wet weekend on both coasts. All right, Michelle, thank you so much.
Sure.
Turning now to San Diego and a tragedy there. 2 suspected smuggling boats crashed off the California coast this weekend, killing at least 8 people. The crash marks one of the deadliest migrant smuggling incidents to ever occur in the area. The search is now underway for at least 7 other people involved in the crash. NBC News correspondent Jesse Kirsch has the details.
At least 8 people are dead in San Diego, and possibly more than a dozen are unaccounted for after authorities say a pair of suspected smuggling boats capsized. Some of the victims were Mexican, according to the consulate.
This is the one of the worst maritime smuggling tragedies that I can think of in California, certainly here in the city of San Diego.
Officials say a Spanish speaker called 911.
What's coming in as a rescue call?
That person reported that there were approximately 15 people and 8 people on 2 vessels that had overturned.
Officials say high tide made it harder for lifeguards to reach the victims, with low visibility limiting overnight searches by air. Eventually, first responders discovering 2 overturned boats, finding adult bodies on the beach and in the water.
There's long inshore holes. So if you step into those holes, those rip currents will pull you along the shore and then back out to sea.
With conditions improving, the search expanding.
Sadly, this tragedy continues and has been happening for quite some time.
Officials did not say where the boats came from, but suspect this was human trafficking, a crime they say has skyrocketed in the area recently, with 23 people being killed at sea in Southern California since 2021 alone.
This is not necessarily people trying to find a better life. These people are often labor trafficked and sex trafficked.
Lives perhaps already under duress, now cut short. Jesse Kirsch, NBC News.
This morning, former Vice President Mike Pence is blasting his former boss for his role in the January 6th insurrection. On Saturday, Pence said he had no right to overturn the 2020 election and that former President Donald Trump's, quote, reckless words endangered his family and everyone at the U.S. Capitol. He went on to say he expects history will hold the former president accountable for the riots. The remarks were Pence's sharpest condemnation yet, and they come amid speculation he may enter the 2024 race for president against former President Donald Trump.
New York prosecutors could soon decide whether former President Trump should face charges in connection to hush money paid to adult performer Stormy Daniels back in 2016. It would be the first criminal case ever brought against an ex-president. This weekend, Trump released a statement on his Truth social media platform. It says, in part, they fall back on the old and rebuke case, which has been rejected by every prosecutor's office that has looked at this, where I relied on counsel in order to resolve this extortion of me, which took place a long time ago. NBC News legal analyst Glenn Kirshner joins us now. So the question we all want to know, in your opinion, what's the likelihood of a grand jury indicting the former president this week?
Well, you know, Joe, I don't know about this week, but the likelihood that Donald Trump will finally be criminally indicted, I think, has gone way up once we heard that Alvin Bragg's prosecutors had invited Donald Trump to appear before the grand jury. What I can tell you is in these long, involved, often white-collar criminal investigations before a grand jury, the last thing prosecutors will do is invite the target of the investigation, that is, the person they're intending to indict, to appear before the grand jury, because it's at that point that the prosecutors have all of the evidence in hand. They've heard from the other witnesses, they've subpoenaed all of the other documents and records, and they are prepared to question the target of the investigation if the target takes them up on the invitation to testify. And prosecutors do that because we want to give the target of the investigation the opportunity to perhaps explain that he's done nothing wrong, committed no crimes. Now, I will say, Joe, rarely do targets take us up on that invitation because they have a privilege against self-incrimination, and they would rather save whatever evidence they have to try to defend themselves at trial.
So, Glenn, the prosecutor here, Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg, was on MSNBC's Politics Nation with Al Sharpton over the weekend. He's received some criticism for why it's taken so long for this investigation to take off. Let's listen to what he had to say about that.
We have an active investigation. Many observed last year the trial of the Trump Organization. And so what I would say is the same team is working with the same type of professionalism and rigor. I'm constrained from saying anything more than that because I don't want to prejudice any investigation. We follow the facts. Doesn't matter what party you are. Doesn't matter your background. What did you do and what does the law say?
So, Glenn, amid this criticism, what do you make of his comments there?
I think the criticism is well placed, Joe, because this is, I would call this a lesser charge. These hush money payments, they're serious. They appear to be criminal. But let's remember, Alvin Bragg's prosecutors brought charges against the Trump Organization, the organization that bears his name, for a 15-year-long criminal scheme to defraud in the first degree, a massive tax fraud scheme. And the Trump Organization was convicted. Of course, the prosecutors who were working that investigation recommended to Bragg that Donald Trump should be sitting at defense table charged in that case, and Bragg killed that investigation at that time for reasons that are entirely unclear. So I'm not going to say this is too little too late. I'm glad Bragg is moving forward on at least some charges against Donald Trump, but I think we're going to have to see how this trial plays out and then assess whether the criticism of Bragg's decisions is fair or unfair.
A key player in all this is Trump's former attorney, lawyer Michael Cohen. He did meet with the DA on Friday. He's expected to testify before a grand jury today. He spoke with our cameras as he headed into court on Friday. Let's listen to that.
I have to applaud District Attorney Bragg for giving Donald the opportunity to come in and to tell his story. Now, knowing Donald as well as I do, understand that he doesn't tell the truth. It's one thing to turn around and to lie on your untruth social. It's another thing to turn around and lie before a grand jury. So I don't suspect that he's going to be coming.
Quickly, Glenn, your thoughts on Michael Cohen's comments?
You know, I think it's finally time for Michael Cohen to appear before the grand jury. The prosecutors in New York have met with him reportedly 20 times. He can be a challenging witness because he committed crimes himself And now the prosecutors are going to ultimately present him to a jury and ask a jury to credit him. But when he says, look, I committed crimes, some of them were at the direction of and for the benefit of Donald Trump, that's the kind of thing that usually resonates with a trial jury.
All right, Glenn Kirshner, thank you for your analysis this morning. We appreciate it.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.